Welcome to Goals and Gamechangers, where we talk with experts on strategy, leadership development, agility, and business transformation. My name is Stacey Louie, and I am the CEO of Hyperdrive. Today, we're speaking with expert in OKRs, Natalie Webb. You may not have heard of OKRs, but this stands for Objectives and Key Results. It's a method for setting organizational goals and getting outrageous results. It started at Intel and made famous by Google. In fact, even U2's Bono has used it to set goals for his nonprofit. Now let's dive in and hear more. Welcome, Natalie. Great to have you here.
Thank you
And
so much.
I'm really interested. Today's topic is about OKRs, objectives and key results. And part of objectives and key results is the idea of helping companies and teams really recreate how they view success and how they achieve success. And just to start us off, yeah, I'm curious, how did you get involved in OKRs in the first place? What was the triggering event in your career?
Interesting. Yeah, great question. So I had been working in the Bay Area with a company that did supply chain logistics and was representing a big coffee store as the lead account person for a big coffee store. And they were losing visibility of all of their products through the different supply chain and logistic woes. So it was a great opportunity to learn that business, but also they had disparate systems and they were sort of just losing focus. At that time, also in the Bay Area, is when a company pretty prominent in the OKR space was developed. The CEO called me and said, "Hey, we need some help with, building out this company and leading this team. And would you be interested?" Because she saw that I had a lot of data visualization experience. And I joined that team, and that was 7 years ago. So I've been in the OKR space since then.
This brings us into the whole area about making large shifts. You mentioned the coffee company. There's organizations out there making these large shifts to help their strategy be much more powerful and influential for creating the success. Now, we call this a game changer, right?
Mhm.
And in the world of game changers, what game changing organizations and events have you seen using OKRs? Like what's happened out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think as folks are running more lean and they're trying to, stretch their teams to manageable capacity, inevitably, they start talking about the demand is just too hard to even measure. And so how do we stretch our teams but still be able to achieve and not stretch them to the point where they're not able to produce what we're hoping they get done. So I've started using language with OKRs, like talk to me about those critical bodies of work that have to get accomplished and how we will know, we, the royal we, as I'm working with my teams, that we're getting there, that we are actually seeing results and that we can validate with metrics that we've actually achieved success. And there's some nuances there. One of the challenges I've seen is some folks are fearful to sort of have that transparency and really open the kimono to what's happening in their departments. And it's an interesting thing, and it ties back to, Harvard's study about, psychological safety in the workplace. But there is this sort of guarding of the cereal bowl that happens sometimes. And I believe they feel they have security through obscurity. And it isn't until you build that relationship and show that, hey, I'm here to help and really shine a light on the good things your team's doing, they're willing to open up and really contribute to one of the tenets of OKRs, which is transparency. So I like building those relationships and letting them know that I'm helping them and that I'm there to be their coach, but also to help them build those OKRs so we can really define what they need to achieve and know that they got there.
That's great. Now you have literally traveled the world and are traveling the world to talk about OKRs and help companies transform their operating model to use OKRs. Tell me a story that stands out in your mind about a company who might have just really pushed the edge and really maximized their utility of OKRs.
Yeah, gosh. I have to say the one thing that I saw the real superpower of OKRs come through was really in the agility space. Working with a very large global fintech company, they had a full set of OKRs that they were in progress of delivering on. And the pandemic hit, right? Everybody knows what that felt like. Just the radical shift overnight of, hey, everything that we've got in flight needs to be put on pause, and it's no for now. And how are we going to pivot to this whole new business that we've never had a plan to deliver on? And in this case, it was about life insurance. Radically, very quickly, people needed life insurance overnight, and it became this huge demand for a company that wasn't built to sell life insurance, from the infomercial calls after 10 p.m. at night. But people were literally scared to death. And so, in this no contact world that we all lived through, they had to create this almost call center type scenario of a business, hands off. The nurses can't come to your homes and, do your blood, height and weight and all of that. They had to do it all on the phone. And so they had to radically shift and build this new business from scratch. And OKRs were agile enough to be able to do that, which I thought was incredibly powerful given it was a global impact.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, did the organization use OKRs before, or was this entirely new to them?
They did. Yeah, I had been working with them for a year and a half at that point. And the reason why I was there for a year and a half, I was working with the most senior leaders, and they loved the consistency and the rigor that I brought to really help them carve out those OKRs every quarter. So I literally would travel wherever they were and would do facilitate the planning session for those teams, help them make really meaty OKRs. And then I would also facilitate the retrospective at the end of the quarter to identify their wins and their do differentlies, and identify areas that may not have worked out with the metrics that they were using, and how they could tighten them up or stretch even more. And then there was always the conversation about moonshots. John Doerr talks about moonshots and how powerful they can be. Hearing from the teams and saying what would really be great, some of those conversations create the best sets of OKRs, and it really solves big business challenges. So I really like that aspect.
You'd mentioned products before, and I'm really curious digging into the change of products. We're talking about life insurance, and traditionally, life insurance, the industry is a little slow, right? They're a little bit more traditional. Now thrown into the scope of having to deal with a pandemic affecting not only how they're having to pay out life insurance as a challenge in their economics, but also how do you get people to buy new types of products? So the whole product question, what did OKRs specifically do with the decisions that had to be made on products?
Yeah, so I think, it was interesting because there's typically always 5 pillars that are themes, if you will, that businesses use when they start defining their OKRs. And, John Doerr's recommendation is 3 to 5. I saw that shift to radical focus of even just 2 objectives in a quarter when a company needed to really drive a certain initiative. I love that part of it. But in this case, to your question about products, they already had their 5 pillars around new product offerings. That's always their growth, which also includes managing your budgets, CapEx, OpEx, ARR, subscriptions, all of the growth things. And then there's always technology, which is preparing for digital disruption, hardening your infrastructure, data security, machine learning, and of course, AI and generative AI. There's always process and system reengineering, customer sat, always huge. And then the other one is people, hiring, training, retaining, keeping top talent, and promoting them. So aside from those pillars, what happened in this crazy moment that was our world, they're like, okay, we're going to focus on 2. We're going to focus on customer satisfaction and new product offering. And that radical focus, and they set the stage. we don't want any KRs that are not specifically contributing to these two. And so it was kind of an amazing thing because everything was put on pause and the progress up to that point was not lost because they had all of that work and all of the detail as to how far they had progressed in that quarter before they had to do this radical shift. And shifting resources like that on a global scale, which is resources, people, time, and money, right? All of that. I mean, that was a huge shift to be able to do so quickly. And OKRs created the framework to do that seamlessly. Because when you put things on pause, you have to figure out what you're pulling in and then how to, yeah, right? How to not lose that momentum, but put it on pause truly and pivot all of that resource to the new direction. So I saw that work. It's definitely a superpower. And it made a huge difference because they had to develop a product line that they never knew they needed. And other companies had to create strategies that they never had to solve for before. I was working with a hospital system in New York, and they're over 100 years old and have never had to look for nurses in their entire company life, right? They always had so many people coming to them, especially from nursing school. And for the first time ever, they had no applicants, none, not one. And so it wasn't until the KR failed that they needed to hire, at least 200 new nurses in a quarter that they said, we have to come up with a new recruiting and hiring strategy. And they had a heads up on that because it was a leading indicator and they saw that they were off track and, back to, program management, basic scope, schedule, and cost, their forecast to actual was off within a few weeks of the quarter. And the KRs were, pinging that, hey, we're off track. And so they started talking like, what's going on? What's going on? Well, it's because during that time, these traveling nurses could go to Kauai and work for $7,000 a week and free room and board. And who wouldn't, I mean,
That's right.
the
We
it's
should
pretty
all have
amazing,
that job. That sounds fantastic.
but Poipu Beach sounds a little better. Why wouldn't you go? So in that time too, I know they shifted to radical focus on driving down contract labor spend and patient satisfaction. So again, I like the radical shift from, the 5 typical pillars you see in all industries to, all right, folks, here's our new focus. And we're going to focus on these 2 things for 90 days because it goes by fast. And bad news only gets worse with time. So the quicker we can identify where we're off track and mitigate that and get back on track, the better for everyone. So yeah, that visibility is critically important. And that's where a tool comes in, honestly, Stacey, that's where you see that, quickly that information in an OKR tool, and there are many now on the market. So I'm often asked to also recommend what tool might be good for a given client. And I'm glad that I can stay neutral and say what I think they might need, because there are pros and cons to every single one. So it's nice to be able to do that as well when we're talking about products.
I'm hearing a few key things coming out of our conversation, Natalie. The idea, the concept that OKRs are bringing focus to an organization. So hyper focus. In fact, and you'd said this organization, this hospital took their OKRs, and instead of like the 3 to 5 that John Doerr would recommend, they took it down to 2. That's extreme
Right.
focus. And this isn't just 2 per team. This is 2 for the organization, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's unheard of. That's phenomenal in this day and age. And I'm also hearing that with this, it gave the organization visibility. So now they're starting to look and pay attention to the key results. And with that visibility, it's getting them fast feedback where they can respond. And with that response, I'm hearing that all of a sudden we have the data available to start making decisions and making choices on those decisions. So
Exactly.
focus, visibility, choices, decisions it
Right.
sounds like a perfect storm in many ways to quickly learn how to make your business much more healthier.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're speaking my language. I'm a data nerd at heart, honestly, and the data always tells the story for sure. And that's sort of the basis of really good key results is that you have that data to prove where you're going and how you're really achieving success. So whether that's KPIs that are existing, because some folks get confused on that, they think, oh, if I have to do KRs, what happens to my KPIs? And
Yeah,
it's
it
like they
happens,
tell
comes up
very
all the
nice,
time.
right? I've even seen where they've got multiple KPIs feeding into one key result. So it can be a many to one too. So they work very well together. No, nothing has to be recreated there.
How do you
So
see that as being different though, in Natalie, a
yeah.
KPI and OKR? Why wouldn't they be the same, or how are they different?
So I have an example that I use. I like to refer to KPIs critically important for running your business, by the way. Don't get rid of them, right? They're good. But they're health metrics. So think of them as health metrics as if you're driving your car. And I'll use Wyoming as an example since, I have a house there. But say you're going to Yellowstone. Don't pet the big fluffy cows, by the way. um, say you're driving to Yellowstone and you put Yellowstone in your GPS, and your health metrics are the things in your car like gas and the battery is charged and you have windshield wiper fluid and your oil. Yeah. So all those health metrics that keep your car going enable you to get from point A to Yellowstone. But ultimately your key result is to arrive to Yellowstone and not pet the big fluffy cows. We call those folks Turons, by the way. Yeah. And they get published in the newspapers.
Neurons. Now that's a mashup of some words,
It
tourist
is. It
and
is.
something else.
I think there's an Instagram if you care to follow. But yeah, so the idea is the key result is getting from point A to point B. Those health metrics, which keep your car going, are what helps you get to that point. But it's the overall result, which is the journey and getting there safely, and all the KPIs are the things that you need to get your car working and get you there.
Well, we're doing transformations and we're working with clients. Sometimes, not often, but sometimes we'll run into a sticky point. It
Mhm.
happens, right? That's the nature of transformations. And sometimes there are things that we all do that could be viewed as, well, you'd mentioned before about those Turons that you run into in Wyoming that want to pet the big, hairy cows, right?
Right.
What sort of Turon behaviors have you seen in a transformation that you would maybe shout out and give us some highlights on what not to do?
Okay, I've got a great example, and this happens fairly regularly. Inevitably, there is a team that will come to an OKR session and say, my team's super busy, and this 90 minutes that I have scheduled with you, I think is a complete waste of time, and I could be doing the work that I need to get done, and I'm not sure why we're still having this meeting, except my boss told me to have it. And I love those. I have to tell you, they're my favorite people because usually they have amazing tribal knowledge and they're protective over their team. And so I say, I get it. Let's just capture, those high level strategic bodies of work that you have to get done that are probably already goals. Just talk to me about what those are and I'll actually type them out for you. And then give me 15 minutes and we'll see if you want to go further. Okay. So I'll type these out while they're talking and I show them in chat, typically in a Zoom or something. And I say, how did I capture this? And they're like, oh my gosh, right? Yeah, that's exactly what we need to get done. And I said, so if this is what you're doing now, or this is what you need to get done, I said, it sounds very complex. Oh yeah, we've got all this, metrics and we got this and we got this coming in and ad hoc work and we're short staffed and yeah. And I said, it seems really complex. And this is the question, right? How do you measure success right now? And then they blink a few times because they're like, oh, right. Because we are about how we deliver. And so I find that when I ask that question, then they start unpacking, some of the detail about what their teams are doing. And then we can get some really great KRs. And then I start getting invited to all their team meetings because they realize that I'm helping them and that I'm not just coaching theory, but I'm actually helping them build what will showcase how strong their teams are. And I'm really an advocate for them. And I'm not just sort of trying to be big brother and spy on what their team is doing or not doing. So I think that's probably one of the best questions I can ask when faced with somebody who says, hey, our stuff's so complex, it's hard to even understand. And I say, I got it, but how do you measure success right now? And then if they struggle answering, they need OKRs more than ever.
That is great advice, especially coming from a Turon like me. So I love
You're
this.
not petting any big fluffy cows in Wyoming, are you?
Not
Please.
often. Not often.
Good. I don't advise it. And don't step off the boardwalk into the thermals, having your feet is a good thing. So yeah, please stay on the boardwalks.
It's not a big hot tub. That's great.
No.
As you're helping these organizations make a transformation, the executives are going through a change, a rapid change. Um, what would you say that these executives found the most difficult through this time?
Consistency between the teams, honestly, and making sure that the rigor was there with the way they were defining the work, even when they had that radical focus. So you don't want to have one team that says, hold a webinar on contract labor spend in Q3. It's like, great. And so what does that do for us? You know what I mean? Like, just have the meeting or have the webinar, or whatever it is, just do it. It's kind of like, keep the lights on kind of thing. I want to talk about the result of doing that. What happens? Do you generate, new recruits? What changes as a result of that? And it's usually an input, and just having that conversation to say, what happens if you do this, or what do you hope happens? And then that usually turns into what they want to realize for a key result. But it's having the conversation and investing and digging in and getting additional detail from the people who are actually on the ground and delivering it, or expected to deliver it. I think the other thing, though, that you mentioned, and it's really worth talking about, OKRs, this idea of top down, bottom up, and horizontal as far as really driving alignment. I've seen that bring up things that were just complete misses from the functional teams and the leadership team, and unpacking that to say, wow, I never even thought about that, or I thought this was all about, driving revenue. I had no idea that process reengineering and driving efficiencies was actually going to help the revenue. Let's talk about how this saves time so we can, pivot our people to other things. And it's that collaboration conversation is just so incredibly valuable. And I've seen it come up and create wonderful metrics and key results for teams at every level, honestly, from, the C-suite down to functional team levels, even, globally. So I like the idea that it can start at the top when a CEO reads Measure What Matters, but then people see the power of it really when it goes down to the functional teams and back up again.
That is a great point, because when we for well over a decade, we've spent our energy and time helping organizations of all shapes and sizes implement an agile way of working. And these agile ways of working have helped the mechanics of processes execute. As we're sitting with the C-suite, we're sitting with the CEO and COO in many cases, and sometimes they're still scratching their heads and they're saying, gosh, we have this strategy. And while the teams continue to get better, we sometimes feel like the teams aren't meeting our points in strategy. There seemed to be a missing layer of communication. And a lot of times the C-suite would talk about strategy from this level, and the teams are delivering at this level. So the organization is in this loop of the C-suite saying, "Gosh, we're not building the things that we really want to be built," and the teams are
Yeah.
coming back with, "Hey, we're building things faster and better for you." But they're just talking past each other. It seems like these OKRs combined with the KPIs are now this communication layer. Like they can now meet and talk about specifically the key results. So this is where I can imagine strategy and tactics meet head on and they can fully integrate into the language of the organization. As opposed to before, it might be hit this KPI and the teams don't necessarily know why or what value it brings to the client or the customers or even to the company itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
interesting. So I have an example that'll resonate with you. And this comes from the conversation of, hey, what would really be great if you could, right? So the C-suite had set a directive to drive net new revenue, right? Makes sense. Every CEO wants to see net new revenue. Growth is probably the most important one of the pillars for sure. In working with the functional team, they were struggling with getting some of the reporting out on the financials in a timely manner. So most financials are lagging indicator key results. They close the books on the month or the quarter, and then it takes a little bit for them to, compile all the data and then present it in a way. Well, so working with the functional team about how can we, get more timely financials to this leadership team, in the 40 billions range, this company. And the leader of the digital transformation team said, well, it'd be really great if we didn't have to compile data from 40 different Salesforce instances. And I was like, what?
Wow, that's amazing.
Talk about a flyby.
40.
That was a shocker because why that was not considered a strategic body of work that we were trying to unpack, I wasn't sure. But that nugget came out in just a working session. And I was like, oh, say more, please. Let's talk about this because yeah. And it was like, we've been trying to do this for a long time. And I hear that with these older companies and these old weird legacy systems, I heard one out of Phoenix, I was working with a healthcare client. They were still doing auto adjudication of their health claims in COBOL, and they skinned it with a SQL database and basically were doing reporting, but it's still in COBOL. Every year they had a goal to try and get it out of COBOL. Like shocking, right? So everybody has some weird old thing that they need to move into this century. And that always gets brought up, it seems, but the new shiny things, especially anything AI and machine learning, and that seems to get some of the focus over what are we going to do with that weird old COBOL stuff? But it's the
Right.
core business.
It's as being a core of the business, you can't just let that core go. And I can
Can't.
imagine if it wasn't for this conversation, that that small indicator, we call it a weak signal, and being able to amplify this weak signal detection in our organization, so we can start
Right.
to see what might be around the corner or the things that might catch us off guard if we're not really focused on it, using something like a session on key results or
Right.
having a conversation about key results and saying, well, wait a second, we have this other thing.
Right.
That may just be left unspoken about, only to catch you later on, right?
Exactly. And it's amazing to me that those nuggets still surprise me. Like I still have those situations where they'll say, yeah, what would really be great? And whatever that is usually like, oh, this is the diamond here that we've been digging for a while, because it changes not only the results that they're trying to achieve, but it changes the energy for the people who are like, I've been dealing with this weird old thing for forever, and I can't wait to transform this into something in this century that people can use and be proud of. So it's great to help and feel like I'm helping. And I think that honestly, that's one of the best compliments that I get is um, a client recently in New York. They wanted me to capture all of the coaching questions that I often use. Things like, so what happens if you do this? How will you know that you achieve success? How will you know you're done? Some of those questions. And they said, we need Natalie in our pocket, like in their jacket pocket. It was hilarious. So I put together like all of my coaching questions, and they said, yeah, we want Natalie in our pocket. We want you, those questions you ask us, we want to ask ourselves as we go through the next planning session. So it was really cool that it was an organic ask from the client, and they called it Natalie in our pocket. Um, and I thought, this is actually really useful. I turned it into a checklist and they were like, this is great. And for me, it's the best compliment when I hear the things that I say being used by those that I've coached or have become an OKR facilitator or coach or champion or advocate or whatever you want to call them. I heard one called an OKR czar, which I thought was pretty fantastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's lots of titles, lots of roles, and you just have to see how it's going to work and how it lands.
Yes,
But I think
embrace
that's
it,
great.
Natalie. You have to embrace
Yeah.
that. I mean, you really are the epitome of understanding how success can be built off of OKRs and helping organizations grow. So, um,
Very kind. Thank you for that.
I want to ask you a question, right, about
Yes.
executive shift again. And this question on executive shift, and as they start to unpack the power of OKRs and how this could work in their organization, what aha moments do you think, or have you seen with these executives?
Yeah, gosh. I had one situation where there was a CFO telling the board that their SaaS tool could deliver this feature. She had been telling the board this for 4 years. When they had an OKR planning session that I was facilitating, the leader over IT said, our tool will never be able to do that. And they hadn't had that conversation yet. And so those ahas shockingly happen a lot where, I mean, they're in the same building. They're only, feet apart. And to have a miss like that was shocking to me. So this happens all the time where there's an assumption or there's an understanding or perhaps a misunderstanding, and that alignment is just not happening because people are just stretched thin, and capacity is a challenge always. And so people are stretched, and so they're not having those conversations unless you carve out the time to really have them and make it meaningful, not just like, here's what we're going to do and you guys are all going to do this, like go get to work. It's how do we move this company together in the right direction? And yeah, I'd like to say that I don't get shocked anymore. I'm not easily rattled, but I am still regularly shocked at some of these big misses that I see. And it seems silly, but doing the planning session where collaboration is key brings up some of these really amazing nuggets that you're shocked to find, but then also very grateful to uncover and help the client with.
We like to talk about players of the week or key players,
Mhm.
people who have really stood out in your experience. And of course, you're a very talented person and you've worked with a lot of other talented people in the world. Um, what player of the week or what player have you seen out there do a shift or make a shift in an organization or with many organizations that you thought, wow, this person is just top notch? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is super easy for me because I do have an OKR hero and just generally I adore this person, and it's Sarah Lobkovich. So she and I worked together doing OKRs years ago, and then we both started our own consulting firms. She happens to be a lawyer, as well as what she would describe herself as an OKR activist. She has a very unique and wonderful, brilliant brain, and I just love her. And she's amazing at what she does. And she's got a book coming out called You Are a Strategist, and it's a no BS approach to doing OKRs. She personally is also sort of my hero, aside from her being an amazing strategist in the OKR space. She and her husband operate and own a racing company, motorcycle racing, and she rides motorcycles, the kinds where she wears full gear and knee pads so that when she takes the corners, she actually scratches her knee pads. Yeah, I mean, come
That's
on, right?
outstanding.
She's kind of my hero in a lot of ways, but she also has this history of climbing with the likes of people like Dean Potter. So she's kind of a badass in all aspects, and I aspire to be more like her all the time. And I love to talk about really strong, talented, and just smart women, and happen to also really adore her. So yeah, she's my hero. She's a force, and anybody who works with her will be better just from being around her energy. She's that good.
Thanks for listening to our episode of Goals and Game Changers on OKRs with Natalie Webb. Our next podcast release will be in 2 weeks from today. Follow Hyperdrive on social media platforms or head to hyperdriveagile.com to stay connected with us. My name is Stacey Louie, CEO of Hyperdrive Agile, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.